Thank you. I want to thank Hope for inviting me to come up and speak. Yeah, it was a long drive from Virginia Beach. It was tough. But this morning I did a Facebook event, and I looked and I saw that I had one person coming, and it was me. So I was a little worried. So thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. I'm going to talk about my 3 experiences, but also I kind of want to talk about how the experiences changed my life, because I really feel that that's what's really important about these experiences. Is the experiences are amazing, you know, but how it affects you is what's life-changing. Okay, because when I was young, like I said, I lived in many homes. I was thrown from one family to the other, to the next, and didn't really have a sense of family. I didn't have a sense of home. I always felt like I was the outsider. There was a lot of neglect and abuse in some of these homes. So finally, my mom kind of brought me back into her fold for the latter part of my years, my teen years. And that's when we were in Sedona. But growing up that way, I developed my own philosophy, and it was kind of brash. It was, you cut your swath through life. You know, you make your own path. And when you think about it, that really doesn't leave any room for anybody else. It's pretty self-involved. So that's who I was through my teens, in my 20s, and it served me pretty well, because I became the chief engineer of a research vessel, the Aloha, and I had an ego up to here because, you know, I thought I was doing really good, and I thought I had a handle on just about everything. I was one of those kind of know-it-alls, you know, and really didn't have time for other people's point of views. I had my point of view, and if you weren't in line with my thoughts, then I'd just go right past you, right over you, whichever. Which is, you know, so I wasn't a nice guy. I wasn't really a nice guy. And then one night in 1983, we just evaluated a new ROV, which is a remote operated vehicle submarine. And we had the design engineer on board, and we were trying to get back to the harbor because he needed to get to LAX to make a flight. And we needed to, you know, and we were all excited about getting the ship back into home port because, you know, downtime was precious to us because we spent so much time out to sea. But there was a really, really bad storm that we were trying to beat into the harbor. Didn't quite make it. The harbor master refused us entry back into our home port because there were 25, 30-foot breakers at the seawall. So we decided we'd put the small boat in, and we'd just use that as a launch and take him and any of the crew that didn't need to bring the ship in once the seas calmed down. We just relieve a bunch of people. Well, normally I don't go on these. You know, normally the seamen, you know, they pretty much take the crew in, that sort of thing. But this night the captain asked me, because I was third officer, and I knew the harbor, and some of the crew that we had on board weren't that experienced. They asked me to go along to kind of navigate. So I said, okay. Now, instead of our small boat, we put our Zodiac in the water. And you guys live on the coast. You probably all know what a Zodiac is. Well, and we used to retrieve subs in 25, 30-foot seas with a Zodiac, and we never had any problems. So we weren't really all that concerned. But we were 2 miles off the coast. That's where we were holding station, waiting, you know. And so we just had rollers out there. Nothing severe. But we all, you know, we plotted, went up, checked the radar screens, plotted where we were going to make our landing, and we jumped in the Zodiac. A bunch of guys brought their gear with them, and we started heading in. Well, if you guys have been out to sea in something like that, you kind of know that, you know, you kind of go up on top of a roller, take a look at the, you know, spot the harbor buoy, take a, you know, bearing, and then go down the trough and up to the next one, kind of do the same thing. Just do that and make your way into the harbor. Well, the wind was blowing, this was nighttime. We lost that harbor buoy in about 15 minutes. We just had no clue. But the shoreline was lit up. So we said, we'll just do a beach landing. That's the nice thing about the Zodiac. And we got about a mile off the coast, and we didn't know the wind had blown us south. And there was this huge sandbar out there that creates these breakers. The surfers love it. It's in Southern California. And we came up, we slid, we drove off of a 25, 30 footer. And I yelled to the mate, turn us around, let's get back out there. We're a lot safer out there. And the next one was right over us. Came down on top of us, folded the Zodiac in half like a peanut butter sandwich. I was in the bow navigating, it just catapulted me into the ocean. And then the wave, just tumbled and tossed. I felt like a rag doll. It was just throwing me all around. Totally lost my orientation. But I'm a commercial diver. I've got thousands of hours logged, and I'm used to being in the water. So I didn't freak out. That's a good thing. That would have killed me for sure, right? But excuse me. But I had this old Mae West. Those of you that have been boating for a while, you remember the old World War II Mae West with the puffy kind of, looked like a giant pillow, right? Well, we had taken them out of the bosun's locker, and I mean, we hadn't worn these things in forever. We had to beat the dirt off them, just to put them on. And so I've got old Mae West on, and I'm just kind of protecting myself and just waiting for Mae West to take me up. I'm just holding my breath. And it's kind of funny, when you're in that kind of situation, I'm the type of person that when things are in a bad way, I get really calm. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm really running out of air. But everything seems to be okay because insurance is paid up, the wife will be taken care of, stuff like that. So I'm going through my regrets list, right? But eventually the euphoria of oxygen deprivation takes over, and I drown. We won't talk about that part too much, but I drowned. And I went into this absolute darkness. And again, now I was a commercial diver, so I was like, what the heck is this? Because in commercial diving, we do, they put us through some exercises to let us know what oxygen deprivation feels like and stuff like that. So we know what that euphoria is and stuff like this. Well, this was way beyond anything that I had experienced in my training, so I was curious. Now, in Ian's research, they call this the void. And to me, many times this absolute darkness can be very frightening to some people. But I just died this very violent death. And so for me, it was very calming because I was no longer, the water on the West Coast comes down out of the north. So it's very cold. And this was in March. It was frigid cold in the water. And I'm no longer feeling cold. I'm no longer hearing the roar of the ocean. It's calm, it's peaceful. And I'm curious, like, wow, what is this? But I didn't feel like I was alone. It felt like there was something more. It was kind of rich. And it's really hard to describe. But again, like I said, I didn't feel like I was alone. But I was comfortable. And so it allowed me to be curious. And then I saw a light. We've all heard about the light, right? And it felt like I was moving toward it. And I can't tell you if I was moving toward it or it was moving toward me. I can't tell you. I did not experience a tunnel. In NDE research, the tunnel only appears in 17 to 20% of experiences. It's not a common element. But the light is a common element. And what I experienced was just coming toward this light. Now I'll try to explain what the light looked like to me, because that's probably one of the most common questions that I get asked. And they love to click the light on television. So to me, what the light looked like was millions upon millions of fragments of light. And they were all kind of like dancing and moving together, kind of a single-mindedness. Have you ever seen like a National Geographic when they have the schools of anchovies? You know, how they all kind of swim together and they'll turn all at one time and there'll be a flash of light that goes across all of them, you know? Well, it kind of looked like that, only just think of it as infinite. And so as I kept getting closer, I started feeling this just waves of love. It felt like I was being wrapped in this warm embrace of love. Well, I'll tell you, I was in gaga awe of this. I mean, and I tried to look at myself. And when I tried to look at myself, it was like I didn't have a body anymore. I was becoming one of those fragments of light. And as I got closer, 3 fragments broke away and came toward me. And as they came toward me, they started welcoming me home. That's the part that's still hard to this day. Is they welcomed me home, and it felt like a homecoming. And like I said, I didn't really have that type of feeling growing up, but I knew these light beings, to me, I call them my soul family. I knew them. They weren't anybody that I'd lived in this life with, but I knew I had lived with them between lives and maybe in past lives. So they felt like family to me. About a dozen more came and greeted, and we all kind of, they communicated, you know, it was more like knowing. It was that type of communication. And we suddenly realized we had to go to this place within the light. It felt like this giant sphere. And we were in this sphere, and I went through what in the research they call the life review. Now, the life review for me was really intense, and that can't describe it, because it was like I was reliving my life through my perspective, but then also through everyone that I'd ever interacted with through their perspective. So it was like my consciousness had fragmented into these multiple streams of consciousness, multiple streams. And that, you know, so I was looking at my life from these multiple points of view. So every interaction and every action that I took, I got to see the ripples that it caused. And that can be incredibly humbling, especially when you've been a brash young man. And not only was I experiencing it this way, but my soul family, who was in the sphere with me, were experiencing it exactly the same way. And so when we got to some of the more unsavory parts of my life, I was ashamed that they had to kind of see this. I didn't want them to have to experience some of those parts of my life. And but they were just loving me, and they were just supporting me. They weren't judging me at all. I think when we die, I think that in death there's a process where we have to let go of some of our earthly emotions, our earthly, parts of being human. And I had brought that judgment with me. And I had to learn to let go. And they were loving me and supporting me and helping me with that. So, but I also got to see some of the cool things where I had done something with loving intention, and it would create the biggest ripples. It had more energy when we express love than anything when we're being, self-centered, self-serving. And those ripples just would go out, and they would actually go out past the sphere into the light. And it was something. It was just something. I didn't know it at the time, but so I went through my entire life like this, and I was watching my entire life, and it was absolutely amazing, incredibly humbling. But then I started experiencing parts of my life that I didn't have reference to. I didn't know it at the time, but I was actually starting to pre-live parts of my future. And I saw things that just didn't make sense to me, like being on TV, things like that, And it just, because that wasn't me. And so my family just supported me, they loved me, they buoyed me up with energy, and they helped me to kind of get through it. But the odd thing about when I crossed that threshold from when, the life that I was reviewing into future life, there was definitely this threshold. And once I crossed the threshold, it was like looking down a corridor, and here were main parts in the center part of the corridor was very clear, but the thresholds, just the periphery, was not quite in focus. So it felt like these are the potentials, and how I get there, I can go off on these little tangents all I want in life, but I'm eventually going to come back to the center and kind of meet these core agreements is what I've come to understand. And so we were kind of progressing forward, and then the light itself spoke to me. This infinite light, all these fragments in unison spoke to me, and they said, "This is not your time, you must return." And I said, "No way. I am not going back." And I said, I've seen, that life was hard. And I've got a family that loves me. I'm feeling loved and supported like I've never felt in life. Why would I want to go back? And I know that body is cold, and not to be too crude, but it just felt like cold meat to me. It was not desirable to go back to that body in the ocean, being tumbled and tossed. And I knew it was injured and broken, and I didn't want to go back to that. So I argued with what I perceived as God. Thought I put up a pretty good argument. You can see it didn't work. Yeah. So the light spoke to me a second time, and it said, "You must return, you have a purpose." And that word purpose just resonated through my being. Because when you're in that light, you're connected to, I like to say you're connected to all the souls that ever were and all the souls that ever will be. And so you have this expanded consciousness that we don't have access to in this life. And when that word purpose resonated through my being, I understood it. And with understanding, I immediately accepted. And I found myself outside my body, watching it in the ocean, still being tumbled and tossed. I'd gotten caught in that kind of cyclical rip current type of wave action that had me just suspended but being tumbled and tossed. But part of the zodiac was caught in that same action. And the bow line had wrapped itself around this shoulder, and the bitter end of the bow line was tapping my lifeless chest. And I was watching this. And the 3 members of my soul family that originally greeted me, they were with me. And we were just observing this. And we were probably down maybe 30 feet or so, 20, 30 feet. And all of a sudden, another set of waves hit the Zodiac, and it popped, and there must have been a little bit of air left in one of the pontoons. Because when it folded in half, that fiberglass floor just shredded the pontoons. But there must have been a little bit of air in a pocket or something that caught it, and it popped up. And when it did, it cinched that line around my arm, and it yanked my arm, actually dislocated the shoulder, and pulled me up to the surface. Dislocated this thumb, too. I always feel, when I'm talking about my near-death experience, I always feel it in my thumb. It's like, oh, man, it wants to pop out. I can feel it. But it pulled me up to the surface. But I was, I just followed it up. My soul family and I, we just kind of followed it up. And we were watching it, and I was mesmerized by this whole scene, because I was sitting there thinking, how is the enormity of me going to fit in there? I was just kind of thinking about that, and as that was, while I was, pondering that, another set of, my body got all tangled up with the wreckage of the Zodiac, and another set of waves started slamming my body up against it, and it pushed some of that salt water out of my lungs. And my soul family gave me a push. I'll thank them later for that. And I found myself back in my body. I like to say, and I put it on the top of the book, that dying is hard, but returning to life is even tougher. I came back. We're still a mile offshore. I had to, expel all that salt water, and I couldn't talk because it had burned my larynx pretty good. So I'm kind of squeaking and squawking, but I could hear my friends. They were yelling for me. They had stayed on station. The heroes that night were those guys. Those 5 guys stayed in probably the most dangerous place in the world at that moment, looking for me. And they said that I was gone about anywhere from 15 to 18 minutes. Now I know for a fact that I was a commercial diver, so I had pretty good lungs. But I know I could hold my breath for about 3.5 at most. That's if I hyperventilated and everything beforehand. And they were looking for me. It's kind of funny because one of them had somehow hung on to a flashlight. And they all rallied around that flashlight. And my wife likes to remind me, they went to that light, you went to the other light. But I was squeaking and squawking, and they finally located me. And so we all rallied around that wreckage, and we used that little bit of flotsam to go in to swim that last mile. And I had to do it with a dislocated shoulder and just kind of hanging on and kicking. And it's kind of funny, a lot of weird things happened that night, but I'm not going to go into that. But what I want to talk about is when I finally got home that night, I tried to share it with my wife. Now, my wife was a nurse, and I'm outside the door, and we lived in one of those complexes where all the apartments have a central courtyard, and I'm at the door, and I'm thinking, because the only thing I had left on were my pants. Everything else had been stripped off me. But my pockets were like sand. They were just full of sand. My eyes, my ears, everything was just impacted with sand. And I'm standing, and I had to be in shock. And I'm standing outside my door, and I'm thinking, I can't go in the house like this. She'll kill me, you know. So I'm taking my pants off in this common courtyard. I'm stripping, you know. And my wife hears a commotion outside the door, and she looks through the, you know, the people, and she sees me, and she's like, opens the door. What are you doing? You know, drags me in the house. And the minute she touched me, she could feel I was hypothermic. I was really, I mean, you know, she touched me and I was like ice. And she had the wherewithal to start a very cool tub of water, get me into it, and kind of bring my body temperature up slowly, right? Well, I thought she was trying to burn me to death. I mean, I honestly, it felt like she was trying to burn me to death. And so I'm yelling at her and stuff, you know. But then when I calmed down, I said, you know, hon, I think I died. And I didn't know it. Unbeknownst to me, that night, she had had a dream that I died. And it scared her. And so when I told her that, she thought I was in some kind of shock or something. She started hitting me. So I thought, ooh, I can't talk to her about this. I totally really just stepped back and went, you know, inward. And the guys I was with that night, we do underwater exploration in '83 was considered like one of the most dangerous jobs in the world at the time. The only people that would insure us was Lloyd's of London. They're the only people that would insure us. So we put each other's lives in each other's hands every day. That's what the job was about. And so death was kind of a taboo subject. So I didn't feel like I could share it with my wife. I didn't feel like I could share it with my mates. So I kind of felt isolated. And this is not uncommon for experiencers. Integration for experiencers is very much determined about what type of social setting they're in. Are they in an environment that's supportive, or are they in an environment that's hostile to the experience? Mine wasn't necessarily hostile, but I didn't feel like I could share it. So I tried to just hold it in. That wasn't working, because the minute I came back, I started seeing auras. At the time, I didn't know what an aura was, so I called it life force energies, because and we lived in Southern California. You ought to see palm trees. They are magnificent. I'm telling you, just awesome. And everywhere in Southern California, there's just all these, you know, apartment complexes, houses. They all have these just beautiful, just landscape gardens. And so it was just, I was walking around, just seeing all of this. But it didn't fit my engineer brain. Because, like, you know, the day before I didn't see this, so what's going on now? Something, you know, I got bonked or something really big, and something's not right. I'm seeing, you know, all this stuff. And when I would look at someone, I'd look in their eyes, I could see their light. I could see their spirit. And that felt incredibly invasive to me. It felt like I don't have the right to look in your eyes and see your spirit. And I was the type of guy, that brass guy before, I was in your face all the time, you know. So suddenly it was like I couldn't do that, because I didn't have your permission to see that deeply into you. Well, I'll tell you, this freaked me out. I didn't have anybody to talk to. I wanted my old life back. Forget this. So I tried to forget the whole thing. I like to say, I put it in a box, wrapped it up with duct tape. Divers love duct tape. Wrote "Do Not Disturb" and shoved it as far back in my memory as I could, with a big old "Do Not Disturb," you know, on it. And I tried to forget it. These experiences don't let you do that, though. They just don't let you do that. And I've known many experiencers who have tried. They just want to get on with their life. And that's fine and well. You could do that for a little while. but the experience won't leave you alone. And what I did initially to try to keep it at bay was I took what I was comfortable with. In that life review, I got a real hard look at who I was. And I saw that, yeah, I got a lot of work to do because I'm not the nicest guy on the block, but I can work on that. And so I called it acceptance, tolerance, and truth. I could accept this is who I am right here, right now. And yeah, I'm not the best person on the planet, but I can work toward it. Tolerance, I saw how those interactions in my life review, how each and every one of us interactions and in the situations of our life affect change. We all affect change. But we don't know it because we can't see the bigger picture. And so I suddenly realized that I could be tolerant of other people and their past. I may not have to agree with it, but I can be tolerant that that's their path. That was a big step for me. And then truth. I realized in that life review that, yeah, there's the factual truth that I was used to being an engineer, everything was black and white. And then suddenly I'm thrust into this world of multicolor. And there's a higher truth that we hold in our hearts. Our hearts recognize it. That's our personal truth. And so I created this kind of mantra. I didn't even know what a mantra was back then, but acceptance, tolerance, and truth. That's what I was going to live by. I was going to take that from the experience. The rest of it, talking to God, soul families, all that stuff, got put in the box. And I figured, and I went like that for 11 years. And I thought I had a pretty good handle on this stuff after 11 years. But I didn't see myself as changing. I thought that, okay, yeah, I adopted these three little, well, and then there's the love. There's also that. So acceptance, tolerance, and truth, that's all held together by love. But then I had a second experience. I quit my life at sea because another strange thing that happens to many experiencers was I suddenly felt like I wasn't being of service. I felt this sudden call that I needed to be of service. I needed to do something to work with my flow, my energy to help humanity in some way, shape, or form. And I didn't feel like being 500 miles offshore all the time doing research was really, really the best thing I could do. So I had this huge call to be of service. I quit my job. I ended up working at Ventura County Medical Center out in California. And I felt like, here I can do a lot more. I still was, and then eventually I came back to Central New York, where I worked for another hospital. But I got involved with a spiritual group. And they were a neat group because they really wanted, they were all inclusive. Many beliefs were represented in this church. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. So I got to learn about a lot of different spirituality, but I still wasn't sharing my experience. Because I had gotten, in 11 years, you get real good at hiding it. You can hide that experience. Like the guys would say, what happened to you during that 18 minutes, And I said, oh, Davy Jones, he spit me back, stuff like that. I just didn't address it. I just hide from it. Or like I would know something was going to happen with the engines, and I stocked parts in advance. Now these are not standard parts that I kept in my parts locker, and And when the reduction gears broke, I had what I needed to fix it on station, you know, out at sea. So we just had to trail that engine and fix the reduction gears and put them back online. And Captain would be like, Dave, you know, how'd you do that? And you go, well, that comes with experience. You know, so you get good at hiding this stuff, you know. But meanwhile, I was developing these gifts of intuitive knowings, I used to call it, intuitive knowings. They were like little downloads that I would get. But then, once I quit my job at sea, started working for that hospital, got involved with the spiritual group, they were going to go back to Sedona. And I grew up in Sedona. Part of my teenage years, I grew up there. And so I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I'll get to go there, I'll attend the things that they're doing that, you know, I like. The rest of the time, I'll go hit some of the trails that I remember from my youth, and I'm going to have this is going to be like a giant vacation for me, a 10-day vacation in Sedona. And we get there the first day. The leaders say, we're going to go up on Bell Rock, and we're going to meditate. And I don't know if y'all know, Bell Rock's a huge vortex area, and it goes right up to the divine. It's right from earth to the divine. And so I said, oh, I know a neat little place over here where I can sit with my back to the rock, and it's all, you know, kind of like a little grotto of mesquite, and I'll just sit there and just, because when I lived out there in my youth, a bunch of the Native American grandmothers saw the dysfunction in my life, and so they kind of showed me how to find my sacred space. So that was, to me, that was meditation. And so I went up there on the rock and I put my back to it, and I started to go into my sacred space, and I heard the light, and it just said, just simply return to the light, and I found myself reliving my near-death experience. And when I say, it said, return to the light, it was like, return to the light. And it just resonated through me, and I found myself back in the water through the darkness, meeting my soul family, life review. Only this time in the life review, I got to see the 11 years I had just lived. And that little bit of change that I'd affected with acceptance, tolerance, and truth, and then trying to maintain, you know, a loving center.
I was late, so I missed the part, on the first part. You went through waters, you said?
Yeah, I drowned.
Oh, okay.
And so this second time around, those 11 years, I got to see those in my life review the same way I had experienced in my first life review with those multiple streams of consciousness. And I saw how much change that little bit had made in my life. And so I said, whoa, you know, and I came out of this one, and you would have thought I was drowned, because I was soaked in perspiration. I could barely stand up. I was like weak in the knees from all the emotional drain I'd just gone through. And I come down, and meanwhile, the rest of the group had finished their meditation. They were all gathered down below. And I'm coming down and off the mountain and off the hill more. And this guy, Richard, and I'd known Richard for a while. And he sees me, and he could see that I was in distress. And he comes up to me. He's like, Dave, you okay? And I was like, Richard, I just blah, started telling him. It was involuntary. All my guards were down, and I just started to, well, I didn't know it. I did know it, but I didn't understand the relationship. But Richard was like the best friend of this guy named Tom Sawyer. I swear to God, it's a real name. He's a real person. And he was, in the very early days of IANS and the early days of research with Kenneth Ring, was one of the research subjects. because he had a very profound near-death experience, and he used to go around, and he was on, you know, Dick Cavett and all these different TV shows back then. And so Richard knew all about near-death experiences. And so he said to me, "Oh, you had a near-death experience. Like, no big deal." You know, it was like, man, the doors flew open for me. It was like, holy cow, you know. And yeah, total acceptance, you know, no big deal. And so for 3 days, I couldn't stop reliving my near-death experience. Everything would remind me, everything. It was weird, touch, sounds, smells, everything reminded me of the experience. So I kept going in and out of the light for 3 days. And I couldn't associate with other people because the love that I felt for these other people would just, emotionally, I just would be a puddle of tears, you know. And so I was I self-isolated, but Richard would look in on me, my first wife, you know, she would, but she couldn't. It was too much for her. She just couldn't quite help me. She just couldn't help me. She wasn't comfortable with it. After the 3 days, I finally it finally subsided enough that I could, you know, go do some hikes and stuff like that, and do a couple evening programs and just kind of sit back. But I wasn't out there a whole lot. But Tom wasn't on this trip, but he was a part of this group, the spiritual group, and I sought him out later. He ended up becoming one of my mentors. And that's one of the things that really helps an experience with the integration, is Tom taught me that, you know, this is not abnormal. What you go through after these experiences, the after effects that experiencers go through, there's a normal sequence of things that happen, okay? And I met another woman within this group that was another well-known experiencer. Her name was Margaret Keene. And she became another mentor, and she taught me that I can go back into the light at any time. We all have that ability to touch that light and to go in and out of the light. And believe me, I was terrified of the thought. But she taught me how to, you know, go in and out of the light. I ended up with a number of good spiritual teachers in my path, but those two became kind of like my mentors. They helped me to understand what it was I was going through. It's part of the reason why I do transformational coaching now, is because I work with 80% of my clients are experiencers. And I learned from this whole experience. I learned a lot of different things. I learned that, gosh, I have so much of it. I put so much in the book about some of the lessons that just kept coming and coming and coming. But the thing that really rocked my world was after the second experience. I told you I used to have like these intuitive knowings and things like that. After the second experience, Spirit started speaking to me. So my level of Spirit communication changed after the second experience, to the point where Spirit and I have an open communication. When I say Spirit, to me, it is my entire soul family, because there's multiple voices. And I don't say that out in public too much, so they might lock me out. But there's multiple voices that I commune with. And every morning when I get up, I have this routine where I go into contemplation, and we talk, and we have conversation, and we talk about insights and things like that. And so the first experience, you know, rocked my world from an engineer, but opened my eyes. The second experience opened my heart, because I realized I had to start living or walking my talk, more or less. You know, I had to start really taking everything. You know, the box had gotten kicked off the back shelf and it stumbled open, and I had to deal with it. So with the help of mentors and spiritual group, I was able to, and IANS, that's when I got introduced to IANS, and I was able to start to process a lot of this that had been happening to those two experiences. The neat thing about the process is that it's not an on-off switch. A lot of people have a misconception that, okay, you have this amazing experience, and the next day one afterwards, you're a different person. That is not the truth. That is the farthest thing from the truth I can tell you. You have to learn how to live with the experience. You have to learn how to integrate it. And a lot of the research that IANS has shows that the initial integration, because integration for experiences is actually lifelong, but the initial integration is depending upon, at the beginning, I remember I mentioned the environment that an experiencer finds himself in, whether it's supportive or non-supportive. It can be anywhere from 7 to 14 years. So even in a supportive environment, that's 7 years. You need that amount of time to really start the integration process so that you feel comfortable with this experience. You begin to, because the problem that experiencers feel when they come back is they feel like there's this new higher level of duality. There's my spiritual self and there's my human self. But I want to come back to wholeness. And so, and that's critical for many experiencers, is coming back to wholeness. And that's what that whole integration process is learning how to live with the experience, bring it into your daily life so that you can just be who you are. You can be that authentic person again. You don't have to hide from it. You don't have to. So along the way, I mean, I picked up a lot of great insights, and I learned how to live life and be authentic. So it's kind of funny because, but I still wasn't sharing my experience out in public a whole lot. There was just a few people, you know, until one night, Margaret, we were in a small group. We just had a day it was a spiritual congress that we used to go to, and in central New York. And at nighttime, we used to just have community time, or we used to have these impromptu rap sessions and things like that. One night, I just got back from doing a ceremony with Ed McGaugh, and Margaret was there, and she was with actually one of the authors from ARE, and she, and I walked up and I said, you know, Margaret, someday I really would like to share my entire experience with you. And she says, oh, great. Hey, everybody, Dave is going to share his experience. Well, I'll tell you, I was just crying, but I shared my whole experience with a group of people about the same size as this group here, and man, I'll tell you, I was just in tears the whole time. But it was probably one of the most cathartic things I could ever do is to share the experience. One of the things I try to tell experiencers that come to me for counseling is, have you written it down yet? Because in writing your experience down, you go into it. You can't tell the experience without touching it. Like when I talk about my soul family, I still get choked up, and it's been, you know, many, many years, 30 plus years. And I still get choked up because I have to touch it. In order to talk about it, you have to touch it. And so when you write about it, you can, because it's just you, the paper, and the pen, you can really, really go into the experience. And you'll be surprised at how many insights will start to come in as you're writing it. More. Because there's a funny thing about our brains, the way our brains work, is, you know, the synapse and everything that we have. They're either, you know, growing or dying, and sometimes we grow new ones. Well, they're like the file system that we have in our office, okay? And memories are held in the files. After you've had a near-death experience or a spiritually transformative experience that is outside of any kind of memory construct that you have, you don't have the drawers and the files to put it in. That's why we need the 7-year integration also, is because it takes that long for our brains to develop the synapse to hold the files so that we can then pull them out. So by writing our experience, dictating it, writing it, but going into it, we can start discovering some of those files that we had misplaced and putting them back in order. Another thing that's very helpful is to have someone ask you questions. I wasn't going to write, I was the most reluctant author you ever met. I was never going to write my book because I felt there were tons of near-death books out there. But, and, you know, what do I have to contribute? But on our way, we were going to go meet Tom Sawyer, and we were going to go hike in Acadia. We were going to go up Cadillac Mountain. And I'm kind of jumping around a little bit because this is later on. This is after the cancer. But so I'm disabled in that you know, I've lost my right lung. I can't feel my hands or my feet. This is I just got back up on my feet, just threw away the cane, and here we're going to go hike Acadia, you know, Cadillac Mountain, and it's kind of like, you know. But Tom, who was crushed by a truck, this is the latter part of his life, was on a breather. So he's going up Cadillac Mountain. He's got 2 walking sticks, and he's got a breather, and he's going, sound like Darth Vader going up the mountain, you know. And he's two crazy nuts climbing up this mountain. Well, on the way there, my wife started asking me questions, and I'm driving, and she had her laptop out, and she starts documenting. She's asking me questions about my experience, and as she's talking, it's like suddenly someone has asked you to look at your experience. You're used to looking at your experience like this, and suddenly someone asks you a question, and now you're looking at your experience like this. It draws more out. So don't be afraid. I love question and answer time. I'm going to leave plenty of time for question and answer time because I love it. It's the best part of sharing your experience, is allow people to query it, you know, that sort of thing. Discussion is great. But then in 2000, I was kind of going on with my life, and I had my 3rd experience. I was in my office. By now, I'm working at this hospital in central New York. I'm the manager of dialysis programs. Don't ask how I got from engineer to dialysis manager. It's just, you know, being in the right place, listening to the Spirit, guidance, and all of that brought me to be this manager. And it felt like my back had exploded. All I could see was like a red haze of pain. And I walked into the director's office. I said, I can't make, because I was supposed to go into a meeting. I said, I can't make the meeting. I got to go up to ED, to the emergency department, because something is not right. So I walked to the emergency department. And I get there, and I'm telling the triage nurse my symptoms, that I've lost feeling in my arm, that I have this excruciating pain in my back. And they call a cart on me, you know, a cardiac arrest cart. And they put a 12-lead EKG on me. And I'm like, I don't think it's that. There's something wrong with my back. And just, I want some pain medicine really bad. But of course, they're not going to prescribe any pain medication until they diagnose what the issue is. So I mean, I am really hurting. And they go through a whole bunch of tests. And by this point in my life, I had separated, and my second wife is part of the scene. And I call her and tell her I'm in the hospital. It looks like I'm going to be here overnight. She comes in. She's sitting in the room with me, and it's kind of. Remember I told you how I pre-lived some of the elements? Well, I'm sitting on the gurney, and the nurse comes in who's attending to me. And it just so happened that this nurse was my secretary while she's going through nursing school. And so, and her tears are coming down, and she's like, Dave, the resident will be in a minute. And I'm like, and I know she knows. And I suddenly realized, oh, I've been here before. I know he's going to walk in the door in about 2 minutes. I know exactly what he's going to say. And so I'm kind of like sitting there. I'd forgotten about the pain. And I'm watching this. It was like deja vu on steroids. I knew exactly what was going to happen. And he comes in and he's hemming and hawing, like this. And I know the next time, in my next life review, I'm probably going to regret this moment, but I let him sweat. And he starts telling me that, oh, we found these masses, and we need to do some tests, and your right lung is full of these masses and stuff, and that it's eaten away a part of your spine. Your spine has collapsed. And I'm like, okay. And because of my pre-awareness of this whole thing, I had gone from,
I need to sit here.
The stages of grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, right? The first one is denial, and then eventually you go through the stages and you come to acceptance. Well, I went right to acceptance. I knew exactly what this was because I had seen it in my life review that I was going to have cancer, but I also saw that I was going to live beyond it. So I immediately accepted, okay, this is part of that core path that I had agreed to do. And of course, he tells me that and everything. But everybody, and so I'm in the hospital and people are coming up to me. It was almost like a third life review because people are coming up to me and they're saying, Dave, because being a manager in a hospital, you have staffs 24/7. And so 24/7, people are coming to my room, sitting on the edge of my bed. The nurses ended up kind of like posting a guard. They moved me right next to the nurses' station so people couldn't just keep coming into my room. Because they're sitting on the edge of the bed, and they were like eulogizing me in the bed, which was kind of funny because I was comforting them. Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Well, they all thought I was in denial when I had gone right to acceptance, but they really perceived me as in denial because it was stage 4. They found that I had lesions in my hip, my brain, my kidneys. Was very aggressive and moving very rapidly. They figured I had about 8 weeks. They told me, get my affairs in order. There's not anything we can do for you. And we will make you as comfortable as possible. They gave me a pint of morphine and a jar of Percocet, and which was scary in those days because I was afraid somebody was going to bonk me over the head for my pint of morphine. But and eventually I was discharged to go home. Well, I with a broken spine. I told them no. If I can say no to God, I can say no to a doctor. I said, no, we're going to treat this. And so, fortunately, I was in a very good position, being one of the managers, assistant directors, actually, at this point. And in the hospital, I was able to put together a care team. And they respected the fact that I had the right to treat it, and treat this. And we did some unconventional traditional medicine, but I also balanced it out with a lot of holistic approaches. Within 6 months, I was cancer-free. And then I've been cancer-free ever since. Just a month ago, we had a little scare because I still go in once a year for a workup. We moved down here. I got an oncologist down here, and once a year, we'll go in for a chest X-ray. And they said, there's some spots we haven't seen before in the other lung. I'm like, But I checked in with Spirit. Spirit wasn't too upset about it, so I didn't get upset about it. But I followed their path because now I'm tolerant. Remember acceptance, tolerance, and truth. So I'm tolerant of this path that they've created for me. Because it didn't feel like it was about me, it was about something else outside of me. I don't know what it is, I can't see the big picture, but I can go with the flow. And it turned out after CAT scans and biopsies that it's nothing. But I've been cancer-free now for 17 years. Now, the spine, that took a little bit, because, I mean, my spine collapsed, so I had to have I had 3 surgeries in a month and a half, in 6 weeks. Because when they started taking, they wouldn't do anything for my spine for over a year. I had to live with my broken spine for over a year. But then I wanted to go swimming because I had no stamina left. And I love the water. Can't stay away from the water. So I wanted to go swimming to try to get some stamina. The doctors were like, wait a minute, isn't there something wrong with your spine? And he went to check it out. And it turned out from all my years of diving, not only did I have my thoracic collapse from the cancer, because it ate away my T1, 2, and 3, and the tumor couldn't support the weight of my spine, so it didn't collapse. But and that's when I lost feeling in my hands and my feet. But also they found that from all my years of diving, I had bone necrosis in my cervix, and it had deteriorated to where it was pressing on my spinal cord. I had about that much. They said I was one sneeze away from being a quadriplegic. So
Just out of curiosity, did you smoke?
I smoked, and I was exposed to asbestos for many, many years. So being an engineer, an old ship's engineer, you had asbestos everywhere, you know, and smoking on top of it, you know, so it was a double-barrel gun, you know.
I'm a legal assistant for an asbestos firm, believe it or not.
Yeah, so, yeah, you know, so anyway, that's, you know, that was kind of one of those things, but I learned a lot through that healthcare crisis. I learned, because I saw that I was not only going to have the cancer, but I also saw I was going to live beyond it, because I saw that there was purpose in it. So one of the things that I did, one of the things Spirit really shared with me was, you know, part of living in life is to be grateful. When we're grateful, we step outside of ourselves. It's the only way to be grateful. You have to step outside yourself in order to be grateful. So we put our ego aside when we're grateful. We put our concerns aside when we're grateful because we're being grateful. And in gratitude, you have to be grateful for everything. It opens up a sense of wonder. Gratitude does. It's actually a path to the divine, being grateful. And so through this, I was grateful for the opportunity to go through this pain and suffering of the cancer. People thought I was absolutely nuts. Now he's really in denial now, you know. But I was grateful for this because I knew there was a purpose behind it. I knew there was a purpose that after I got past it, there would be something there that I was supposed to accomplish. And gratitude is one of those things that it kind of helps you, it buoys you up. And another thing that I learned was because I had to manage this pain, and I did not want to live on morphine and Percocet. So Spirit helped me to develop a new level of mindfulness. In fact, if you notice, I can't stand in one spot for long. I have to kind of wiggle around because I can't feel my feet. So I have to sense my ankles, okay? And I have to, and that's how I sense where I am. Because most of us balance with our toes. We feel our toes. Well, when they're not there, you have to kind of use something else. So Spirit showed me how to use mindfulness to be able to balance with my ankles, to feel the pressure on my ankles, and to be able to kind of get away from the walker and the cane and the wheelchairs and all that stuff, and to stand up and be mobile again. But it also taught me, and through mindfulness, it taught me that I can take the pain, I can go into the pain. I do this. This is part of my morning routine every day for the past years. is I go into the pain and I set it aside. Because I'm not going to allow the pain to dictate my life. I know it's there because I'm a guy. I do dumb stuff, like all guys do. Okay, I push the envelope. You know, I'm still a little bit of that guy. And so, so it's good that the pain is there because it reminds me not to be that dumb guy and do stupid stuff. Okay, but I want to live my life, and so I chose, and Spirit helped me to develop mindfulness to be able to put that pain aside and to live my life. Now, I want to leave plenty of time to be able to do question and answer. The one thing I have to say, I guess, is I've learned, because it's been a while, 83 was my first experience, and I've been working on this integration. And I work with a lot of experiences because we have retreats. We have one retreat in Virginia Beach this October, and we have one in St. Louis every spring. That's for experiencers. The one in St. Louis is just for near-death experiencers. You have to die to get into that one. The one in Virginia Beach is for people that have had all sorts of spiritually transformative experiences. It's open to everyone. And for experiencers to have community, like this group, I'm really excited that Williamsburg IANS exists. I'm really, really excited because to have a sense of community for experiencers is important. To have a place where you have a safe environment where you can talk about these subjects is important. And I've become, I feel that I'm an advocate for experiencers. I think that that's a part of my purpose. After the 2 experiences and the cancer, I'm an advocate for survivors. I really believe that that's part of my purpose now. And I've come to realize, the divine is within us all. We don't really have to go looking for it. We just have to look within. And when we do that, we can find that sense of joy. We can find that sense of wonder. Because when we live in a sense of wonder, we become explorers. To live in wonder, you're exploring. You're looking for the truth. That's what wonder is all about. It's looking for the truth. And so I try to live each and every day in a state of wonder. And I think when we do that, we're more forgiving, we're more compassionate, we're open. We're open to whatever the world has to give us. So I want to thank you.